Hello, Brobs. It's time for to add another book to the collection here. The Devil's Picture Books. A History of Playing Cards by Mrs. John King van Rensselaer. I believe this book, which I've already previewed, and one of those so-called shorts. I think 1890s, 1893. Let's look at this first plate. It's very nice. Look at this plate. Look at it, bruv. The Devil's Picture Books. Illustrated, New York, Dodd, Mead and Company, 1893. Copyright 1890. University Press, John Wilson and Son, Cambridge. Preface: The Devil's Books was the name bestowed upon playing cards by the Puritans and other pious souls who were probably in hopes that this name would alarm timid persons and so prevent their use. Whether or not his satanic majesty originated playing cards, we have no means of discovering, but it is more probable that he only inspired their invention and placed them in the hands of mankind, who have eagerly adopted this simple means of amusing themselves, and have used it according to the good or evil which predominated in their own breasts. Many learned men have written books or treatises on playing cards, and I am indebted for a large part of the information contained in this history to Les Cartes et Joueurs by M. Paul Lacroix, Facts and Speculations about Playing Cards by Mr. Chatto, The History of Playing Cards by the Reverend Edward Taylor, and The History of Playing Cards by Mr. Singer. Why won't you open? I believe there's another page there, but I could be wrong. Don't want to rip anything. Let's see. I don't think there is anything in there. Well, that was a good waste of 30 seconds. Preface: These books are now out of print and somewhat difficult to obtain, and I hope by bringing into a small compass the principal features set forth in them, I shall be able to place before a number of readers interesting facts that would be otherwise unobtainable. Hearty thanks are due to the custodians of the National Museum in Washington, who have aided me in every way in their power, and also to the many kind friends who have sought far and wide for unique and uncommon packs of cards, and helped materially by gathering facts relating to them for me. That many nations have cards peculiar to their own country and almost unknown beyond its boundaries may be a matter of surprise to some. That such ordinary and familiar objects as playing cards should have a history will astonish others. My hope is that the subject will interest my readers as it has done me. Any facts concerning playing cards or any communication relating to rare or curious packs will be gladly received by the author, who would like to add to her collection. M.K. van Rensselaer, New York, 1890. Mrs. King was known to have owned a pack of cards that were made out of human skin. The story that encompasses the origins of those is probably a wives' tale, or not a wives' tale, but a folklore or urban legend. But yeah, that's how serious she was about her cards. The contents in the first section will be the tarots, or the first cards. List of illustrations, blah, blah, blah. The Devil's Picture Books, the tarots. The ladies arm in arm in clusters, as great and gracious of as what's that say? As I don't understand. The ladies arm in arm in clusters, as great and gracious as sisters. What the heck is that? Is it just the A with an umlaut? Gracious? Are as sisters, as great and gracious are as sisters? I don't know. The ladies arm in arm in clusters, as great and gracious as sisters. On Lee Lang nights with crabbit looks, pour over the devil picture books. Oh, Robert Burns. Shocking. The Tarots. The Devil's Pictures book. Jesus. Probably shouldn't be reading at 2 a.m. The Devil's Pictures book. I can't do it. The Devil's Picture books. The Tarots. A youth of frolic, an old age of cards. Hone everyday book. The origin of playing cards and their inventor is still a subject of speculation and will probably remain forever undiscovered. Almost every country in Europe has, through her scholars, laid claim to having been the first to use cards, and many documentary and other proofs have been brought forward to substantiate their assertions, which are based upon ancient laws, common traditions, or contemporary illustrations. The cards were brought from the East to Europe about the time of the Crusades, and probably by the home returning warriors who imported many of the newly acquired customs and habits of the Orient into their own countries. Seems to be a well-established fact, and it does not contradict the statement made by some writers who declare that the gypsies, who about that time began to wander over Europe, brought with them and introduced cards, which they used, as they do at the present day, for divining the future. Cards may well have become known by both means, and they spread rapidly over all of what was then considered the only civilized part of the world, and the proofs that have been brought forward show that they were known nearly simultaneously in Italy, Spain, France, Germany, and England, and point to a common origin not to be found in any one of these countries. The first cards known in Europe, and which were named tarots, tarocchi, etc., seem to differ in almost every respect from those of the 15th century, although these probably inspired their invention. The latter resemble much more those of the present day than they do the original tarot. The first packs consisted of 78 cards, that is, of 4 suits of numeral cards, and besides these, there were 22 emblematical pictured cards, which were called atus. This illustration. It's got a tooth. Is that a tooth, bruv? I don't think it's a tooth. I think it's scissors or something. Or a touts, a word which M. Duchesne, a French writer, declares signifies, above all, this word used in French has the same meaning as our word trump. The marks which distinguish the tarot suits are usually swords, cups, sticks, and money, and each one consists of 14 cards, 10 of which are pips, and 3 or 4 coat cards, namely king, queen, knight, and knave. The queen was not always admitted. These suits seem to be the origin of the modern packs, and the emblems used on them have been adopted in many countries where the tout part was discarded while the rest of the pack with its original symbols was retained. Mr. Singer gives a graphic description of these cards and the games to be played with them, and says that among different nations the suits, as will be hereafter shown, are distinguished by marks peculiar to themselves, while only the general features of the numbered cards, headed by figures or court cards, have been retained. The second division of the tarot pack, called a touts, are numbered up to 21, each of these having its proper value, and besides All these, there is one not numbered and not belonging to, and pardon the fact that I'm turning these pages slowly because I don't want to rip them or pull them from the spine. Oh, that's a not nice creak. The division of the suit cards, which is called the Fau, and in playing the game is designed mat or il mato. This joker, as we should term it, has no value of its own, but augments that of any of the atouts, to which it may be joined, and is sometimes played instead of a queen, being then called her excuse. These atouts are each represented by a print which is supposed to resemble some character, and the name is generally placed on the card. Among them are an emperor, a cupid, a chariot, a hermit, a gallows, death, the day of judgment, a pope, fortune, temperance, justice, the moon, the sun, etc. The order in which they are placed is not always the same, and is seemingly unimportant. The game may be played by 2 or 4 persons. The one who holds the fool regains his stake. La force, or strength, takes twice as much from the pool, while la mort, or death, most appropriately sweeps the board. It is said that the distribution of the suit cards has a peculiar signification. Each one is distinguished by an emblem which represents the 4 classes into which communities were once divided. First comes the churchman, represented by the chalice or coppice. Next in rank, the warrior, whose emblem is the sword. Third, the merchant, symbolized by a coin. And fourth, the workman with his staff. It will be shown hereafter that almost all writers on the subject allow the possibility of the division of the suits being shown in the cards. The earliest known specimens of these tarot cards are now to be found in the Cabinet des Estampes in Paris, and are supposed to have formed part of the pack, which was painted for King Charles VII of France in 1393 to cheer and amuse him during an illness which had been caused by a coup de soleil in 1392, and which made him a melancholy but not a dangerous lunatic. M. Paul Lacroix described these tarots as having been most delicately painted and resembling in treatment the illuminations of manuscripts. They are on a golden background on which dots forming an ornamental pattern were impressed. A border of silver surrounded, and as it were framed each picture. Let me start that over. A border of silver surrounded, and as it were framed each picture, through which a dotted line twisted spirally like a ribbon. M. Lacroix points out that this dotted line, in his language technically termed a tare, which also means a fault or defect, was a sort of fluting produced by small holes pricked into the substance of which the cards were made, and fancies that to these Turks, tears, the tarots over their name, owe their name. Oh my God, I'm butchering this. Was a sort of fluting produced by small holes pricked into the substance of which the cards were made, and fancies that to these tears, the tarots owe their name. Other writers, however, dispute this derivation of the word and discover new ones for themselves, which are generally quite as fanciful and far-fetched. These well-preserved tarots are 18 centimeters by 9 and are painted in watercolors on a thin card. The composition of the figures is ingenious and artistic. The drawing is correct and full of character, and the colors are still brilliant. A narrow border of black and white checks surrounds each one. This border is a piece of checkered paper pasted on the back of the card and neatly folded over its edge, as if to protect it, showing on the face of the card and forming a frame for the pictures. This fashion of having a checkered or diapered back was closely followed in many of the countries where cards have been used, and these backs are still seen, although this old pattern, which, as will hereafter be seen, had probably a very interesting origin, has been generally discarded, and each card maker. Look at this plate first. A very nice plate. And each card maker adopts a different device with which to decorate the backs of his cards, according to his own fancy. In France, the backs are generally plain and colored red, pink, or blue. Get off there. In Spain, the pattern is dotted on the surface in lines and circles, while in other countries, interlaced and meaningless designs are employed. Packs of cards closely resembling the original tarots are still to be found in some parts of Switzerland, Germany, and Alsace, where they are used by the peasantry in the districts which are not much frequented by travelers. But they are unknown to the rest of the world except as curiosities. They are, however, the sole representatives of the cards which the Crusaders or the Gypsies brought into Europe, and which the latter used whenever possible to divine the future or recall the past. Some writers point to the Eastern origin of these tarots, because in them death is numbered 13, and the idea of fatality or bad luck attached to that number is essentially Oriental, and they declare that the fact that the emblematical attouts are numbered from low to high, just as certain Asiatic alphabets are written from left to right, may cover a similar interpretation. That appears to be the end of the chapter. Shall we go on the chess? I don't think so. It's too long. I'll continue with this next time. Goodbye.